So this is what it looks like after about 4 hours at room temperature. A few little bubbles here and there. Nothing, nothing, nothing to crow about. Hasn't really risen much. Anyway, so this will go cover it. Put it into the refrigerator if I can get this thing covered. There we go. Alright, that's good enough. Alright. Here we go. Whoa. Okay, there's a spot here. Alright, in you go for about 12 hours. Really, no more than 12 hours. So, what time is it? It's about just before 10 o'clock. Anyway, we will come back in the morning and continue with our sourdough. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. We have our sourdough that has been sitting in the refrigerator for 12 hours. Now, you might want to know why we do that. What's been happening in the refrigerator? Give you a closer look at this. Well, what's been happening in the refrigerator is it's slowed down the fermentation quite a bit. There's not a whole lot of conversion of sugars to carbon dioxide, so there isn't a whole lot of bubbling going on here. But the real important reason why we do this is there's a activity with enzymes that goes on that occurs at low temperature that doesn't occur so much at higher temperature. So we chill it down so the enzymes can convert some of the starches to sugars, and so it's got a little bit more fuel coming up. Whereas if we just let it sit out overnight, that process would still take place, but then the yeast would convert it all to carbon dioxide, and it would overproof by now. It would be done. And we've slowed it down because the enzymes produce certain types of acids, acetic acid, lactic acid, and it gives it a more sour, tangier flavor. So that's why we like to use the refrigerator, give it a little bit more flavor in the enzyme activity overnight. So now, not all sourdough recipes do this. Some skip that process entirely and it comes out perfectly fine. But I've been experimenting with refrigeration overnight, and I believe it does make a better, tastier loaf. Anyway, so this, you can see it, we have a few little bubbles here, but it's mostly a sticky mass. Anyway, so our next step is to mix in some other ingredients. The important ingredients to bring in basically is we're going to add more flour. This is more fuel, more flour to it. So we're going to add another cup. And let's get out the trusty scale here. Zero that out. Okay, again, I like to use weights. 120 grams for another cup of flour. Okay. Then salt. The recipe calls for a teaspoon of salt, but we're going to be adding some olives into the recipe. I do these just to make olive bread, and these olives have salt in them, and sometimes if the olives are very salty, you wouldn't add any additional salt into it. But these are not so salty olives, so I kind of hedge and I go a half teaspoon of salt. So we'll put that in there. So this next step is actually quite important in sourdough making. Something you want to do very well, and that's all these dry powdery ingredients. It's important to mix it very, very well. Otherwise, the sourdough won't turn out so well. The flour won't be distributed so well along with the salt, and we won't get very good rise out of this later. So it's important right now to mix this up. Oh, we do have a little puffy and fluffy going on with the overnight, so it did produce some gas in there. And so we're going to try to do our best to just go ahead and put this down on the working board. I'm going to try to work it with our hands in. Okay, can't be afraid to get a little flour in your hands here, because but it does help to work the dough. Anyway, so we want to get as much as we can all mixed together. Oh, there's one more ingredient I almost forgot, and that's we need to add more water. But I'll do that after I get a lot of this incorporated. The water is not in the recipe, but I like to add it to increase the hydration level. Makes a better rise in the sourdough. But it's right now it's easier to handle, so I can get most of the mixing done. Then I can do the water mixing at the very end. The water mixing isn't as critical as getting the flour mixed and the salt throughout. And we're going to be adding the olives and some herbs and some Meyer lemon zest. And it's not so critical to mix those. We're going to be turning the dough over a few more times this afternoon. So what's important is to get this initial mix done very well. And notice how I'm kind of folding it in half every time. You do that after a while and it mixes up pretty well if you just keep folding it in half. Starting to get there. Okay. So far, this dough is easy to work with. The hydration level is low, and I believe the King Arthur recipe does that intentionally because a lot of people are uncomfortable dealing with dough that's very sticky, and this is not sticky right now, but I'm going to make it sticky here in a minute. But after a lot of trial and error, I've learned a few little tricks on the side that make life a lot easier. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is add about a quarter cup or so. And I'm going to measure it out real quick. Okay, I'm going to add this to the dough. I'm going to use my spatula because try to get it in. Oop, hoo-hoo. Now, I think we've added a little bit too much water, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour here. In any case, it starts to get really sticky with the extra water in there. Let's get it out on the board one more time. Work with it. I could have added the water along with the flour at the beginning. Could have done that. It would have been a bit shorter to do this, but in any case, we've starting to get really sticky now. Look at that. All right, so time to add other ingredients. Now, you can go ahead and make the sourdough without any additions. It'll make a very nice loaf. But I like to add a few more things sometimes, just for variety. You can, I'm going to add 6-ounce can. These are, I chopped these up myself. They're whole pitted green olives, and these come from Santa Barbara. Anyway, and 2 teaspoons of herbes de Provence. By the way, if you make sourdough bread and you want to just add something simple, just add some rosemary into it or some thyme. It does it, just little things can really set the sourdough off. And last ingredient, I learned this from some other recipes. It came out very nice. Is orange zest from Meyer lemons. I don't know if you have them, but if you don't have Meyer lemons, you can just use an orange. Nice zest, and it make it taste more interesting. But again, these are all optional. You don't need to fret about having all the ingredients. Sometimes you can just clean out your pantry or refrigerator and put nuts in them. You can do a number of things. Where did I put that spatula? Oh, here. Anyway, so now we'll start mixing. Woohoo! And gotta get the olives in there so they quit running away. Once again, don't be afraid to get your hands messy. Look at that. Woo! Just a big mass. This sticky consistency, but it's not liquid, it's gelatinous type. That's how you want it to go right now. If it's too runny, you got to add flour. If it's holds its shape very well and isn't so sticky, you got to add water. So, and I think I've mentioned this before, that there's really no tried and true recipe. It all comes down to experience and knowing how to adjust it when, because you never know the temperature of the room. You don't exactly know how the flour's going to operate. You don't know the humidity. It's all going to vary around. That's what makes sourdough making so fun. You never know what you're going to get. So it's a very good thing to make here in Mathew's Hot Kitchen. Okay, I think we can put this into the original container. Also a nice little variation is to put black and green olives together in the mixture. Okay, so what do we do now? Well, we're going to cover it, and we're going to let it sit for a number of hours so it can ferment. And about every hour, we're going to come back and fold it around a bit so we get a sense for how the dough is progressing. And what I mean by that is how much fluffy and airiness is it getting. It will feed back to me through my hands how it's progressing. Is it fermenting? Is it is it needing more time? So about every hour, come and fold it over a few times, a little bit of flour to protect from sticking. So that's what we're going to do. Hopefully I'll capture that for you. But this is going to take up to 5 hours. I'll explain later, you don't want to cut this short. You don't want to go too long because we still have the final rise to do, which is important. But this kind of sets it up for about 3 to 5 hours of fermenting. And if you have a proofing oven, you could put it in there, but you got to be careful. It might move it along too fast. I just leave it sit out here at room temperature, and if I need to speed it up, I'll put it in the oven under proofing conditions if I'm racing for a deadline. But right now I just leave it out, and the room is temperature right here. It says 76, so that's a good temperature Fahrenheit, and we'll let it sit out for an hour, and we'll come back. Well, it's been about an hour, so let's check the dough. Looks like not much has happened here. It's not a whole lot going on, but we're going to take it out and work with it a bit. First thing is put some flour down, otherwise it's unmanageable. It'll stick everywhere. Flour, you can work with it at least. Hands all floured up. Smells nice. Alright. Again, this is very sticky. A few folds in it. It's got a little bit of, you can see that, it's got a little bit of puffiness to it now, so it has been fermenting. Maybe just a few more folds and that'll be it. Again, we do this to keep track of how it's progressing. And this actually does something they call strengthening the dough. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I think it develops it better. It'll rise better. It have a little bit more structure in it. That's what I think they mean by that. But anyway, so. Anyway, barely handle it. Put it back in. We'll cover it. Come back in another hour or so. Well, it's been an hour. So let's take a look at our dough. Yeah, it's starting to get it's starting to rise up a little bit here. It's moving along. Let's pull it out. Very sticky. That. Ooh, very, very sticky. So we turn it over a few times. That's starting to stick pretty bad. Anyway, just going to fold it over just a few times. I'm not even going to add any flour. Keep it very sticky. It's picking up a little bit from the board, but I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm not adding flour. Okay. Back in the glass bowl you go. We'll come back in about another hour and check on the progress. What we're looking for is it to really start to take off on air, puffiness, growth, and once I'm satisfied it's taking off healthy, then we'll put it in a proofing pan for the final rise. Oh, my assistant is back. Come over here.
Oh,
what do you think?
Olives.
Smell. What do you think?
Oh, smells great.
Okay.
I see the lemon skin.
Yeah. The zest.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So we'll come back and we've got to plan our day around sneaking out between tending this, but I think we've got about an hour or so when we come back. And
when can I eat?
Well, that's coming. It's coming later on this afternoon, maybe early evening.
Okay, great.
All right. And we're back. It's been about an hour and a half. We had to run an errand. So let's look at our dough. It hasn't really risen much. It's a kind of a cold, rainy day out, so maybe that has something to do with it. So I'm gonna work this over a little bit more than last time. Some flour. Again, we're supposed to only put a few folds into it. But what we're looking for is air bubbles. You want to see evidence that this is producing gas. Make a nice airy loaf. Or if it needs a little bit more time to get there. Fold over once. See how sticky it is. With a little bit of flour, it's very sticky. Another fold. 2 more folds. And we're starting to get some air in there. On closer inspection, we got a little bit more. So, question is, are we ready for final proof or not? And I think I might be ready for final proof. It's a little bit more air in there than I originally thought. And final proof can take up to 2 hours minimum. Can go longer. So I think it's progressing well. So let's set this up for final proof. And what we're going to use for final proof, we're going to use a form, and I'm going to make this what do they call it, bouilli or ball. Very simple round loaf. You don't really need a form, but I like using some things in the kitchen to help me. First thing is parchment paper. Very helpful. And then the other thing I like to get to get a 10-inch pan, and that becomes my form, and it keeps the dough kind of contained. So let's so I try to, when I get ready to put it in the form, I like to kind of pull everything together on the bottom of a ball. There are ways you can do this by folding it over, by creating tension. And I've kind of done that here as I've been folding it around. So I'm going to go ahead and get that. I'm going to show you the parchment paper comes in very handy later on in the process. Right now it's going to be a kind of a non-stick holding pattern. And then as it's rising for the next 2 hours, we're going to need to cover it. And this cling wrap is good for that. However, it's cling wrap is a little hard to handle and gets a little sticky at times. So I like to put a little bit of oil on it. Just with my hand, and get a little on the other side, helps keep it flat. Anyway, so yeah, you can kind of see the olive sticking up. It's got a little bit of air in it. So we're going to put a little blanket over it, so to speak. We're going to let it sit here, and you can watch it over the next few hours to see it's supposed to increase in size, virtually double in size over the next few hours. So let's see. Okay, we're done proofing. It turned out 2 hours was not nearly enough. We needed to go 3.5 hours, and I had to put in the last hour and a half put the dough in a proofing oven to give it a little bit more warmth. Proofing oven is my regular oven, but with just the light bulb turned on inside. Anyway, so what does our dough look like? Well, definitely has grown in size. There are some bubbles here and there amongst the olives. It seems to have, um, it's puffy, of course. Anyway, so this does look like it's ready for baking. There's what they call the poke test. And to be honest, you can research this, but there's this poke test rule doesn't really hold up very well. I just go by the overall size and whether I see bubbles in it to know if it's ready or not. And also, a lot of studies have shown it's kind of hard to overproof a sourdough. There's a window of 2, 3, 4 hours you can work with. It's quite generous. So just make sure you get it to this state, and you've got maybe a few hours of leeway, and then once it's here, you go ahead and bake it. So baking, I have the oven preheated to 450 degrees with a enamel pot in it. I'll bring it out here just a moment. It's very hot. Put down the trivets. Put on my welding gloves. You can get these at a bakery store. It's a 7-quart enameled cast iron pot. It's great for baking. Okay, it's very hot. So how do I get this from the pan into there? Well, fortunately, we have little corners here to hold it by, and we will use it to sling it in, lift it up, and put it into the pot. Very carefully. It goes right in, and kind of center it around. Some scissors here to cut all the excess off. And maybe you see this a bit here. I'm going to take a razor blade and cut a star pattern in the very top. What this does, it allows the bread, it's going to get on what we call an oven spring. And it's because the temperature is going to cause the rise to suddenly increase a lot when I put it in. And if we don't have a relief, it's going to withhold the rising of the bread. So it's important to cut. And unfortunately, this razor blade is not doing very good. But a very, very sharp knife can do the trick as well. Make sure you cut into it well. Let me try a knife. Very, very sharp knife. And really get down in there, at least a 1/4 inch. You can create different patterns. I like the star. And one more. Okay. One more thing I like to do is give it a dust of flour on top. I'm not sure it has much function. It makes it look nicer when it's done. Okay, let's get the gloves back on. Lid goes on. Now, it's going to steam in here for the first 30 minutes or so. Then we're going to take the lid off and dry it out. So it's a two-stage cooking process. First 30 minutes, cover. Steams, it'll form a very nice crust. Last 20 minutes, we'll uncover it and let it dry out. Okay, so here goes. Set the timer for 30 minutes. And we will wait for it to get done the first part of baking. Now, if you don't like handling a very, very hot container like that, you can put it in when it's all cold and let the oven bring the pot up to temperature. That works as well. Gives it a little extended rise on it, rise time. That works well. People say putting it in the very hot pot right now causes steam and makes a crispier crust. Either way works. I just decided to do it this way. Anyway, so let's wait and we'll see what this. We'll wait till it's all done cooking. And remember, you've got to remove the lid about halfway into the cooking in order to let the crust dry out. And I'm going to probably show a picture of that coming up. But after that, we'll be back and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, it's been about well, it's been exactly 30 minutes. So, and we'll take the lid off. Boy, that smells great. It's been putting out a nice sour smell, and now I'm smelling the herbs. Oh, look at that. Wow, hot. Even these welder's gloves can't stand up to the heat sometimes, so I got to get it off. Anyway, so you got a nice little oven spring going on there. Looks good. Smells good. And put it in for another 20 minutes. Uncovered. Oh, and by the way, I'll be peeking in this thing, making sure it doesn't get too brown. But you don't want it, it's a balance between the color of the crust. The right color of the crust is kind of a medium deep mahogany brown. And we want to target that color. Hey, welcome back. We're about done. So I'm going to go in the oven and we're going to pull it out. Look at that. Well, it wound up being only 15 minutes was needed in the uncovered to get it to the color we needed. This is very hot, so just try to be careful with it. Oh, here's my assistant. She'll come over here and...
Let me see.
What do you think?
Beautiful. I can smell the savory addition to rosemary.
I put herbs de Provence.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I can smell very nice herbs.
Still very hot. Now, what's important is to put it on a cooling rack. You have to let it cool for about an hour to, well, so you can eat it.
Okay.
But it's fun to look at it and admire it. It's still very hot. It needs to, I think, be to a temperature internally of 200, but I don't measure it. I can go by the color.
Mm.
This is the right color.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful color. Perfect.
Yeah. And sometimes you can hear it crackle. Sometimes you can hear it crackle.
Yeah, I know. Not yet.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back in a little bit, and we'll taste it.
Yay!
It's been again. This is there's no solid recipe. You have to adjust things as you go, depending on circumstances. So, but it's what makes sourdough so fascinating. Every loaf comes out a little bit different. Okay, well, it's now in the evening the next day. This is what it's all about. The loaf of bread here. Sourdough olive. So we're going to crack it open. And my assistant, Kimiko, come in. Okay. Get it off the rack. It's still a little too hot, but I can't wait. I can't wait to a nice crispy crust. And we'll go right down the middle. Look at that crust. Look, crackle.
I can hear it.
Okay.
Oh, smell.
Look at that.
Too bad people who are viewing cannot
You can't
smell it.
That's too. Look at these
Holes.
these voids, which it. Yeah, I like it.
Looks great.
Look at this one.
Beautiful.
All right, now it all looks good. How does it taste?
Mine.
Where at?
Inside is moist and chewy and flavorful. Outside, crisp.
Where's that crust there?
The crust.
Nice thin, crisp crust. Inside moist, and you don't need butter on this, right?
No, it's very moist and rich.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so this is it's some work, but it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of experience to know how to adjust things. But it's actually very simple in the end.
And you just can't get this at the store.
No, you just can't. So that's why it's fun doing it at home as a hobby. Every loaf comes out a little bit different. It's a bit of a surprise. And it's great to eat when you get it like this. So anyway, so this will conclude Mathew's Hot Kitchen, this episode of the sourdough. And join us again, Mathew's Hot Kitchen, where you never know what we're going to cook up. Thank you, and good night.